Okay, so HiiT training. So we'll talk about what HiiT training is. We'll talk about some good things about it. We'll talk about some bad things about it. Talk about who should do it. And then we'll talk about our own opinions on it, and we'll give you an idea as to what what I think about it, and what you think about it. And we'll just see where we go, shall we?
Excellent.
So HiiT training to you. What's HiiT training? Someone asks you in the gym, right, David, what's HiiT training?
I get this all the time. Everyone wants to know. Everyone wants to know what HiiT stands for. So obviously, high intensity interval training. It's a good topic because most of the time in the fitness industry, especially, everyone wants to compare things. One thing has to be better than the other thing.
Yeah.
So they've learnt what slow steady cardio is, and they're always trying to compare it to, well, is HiiT training better? Is one or the other better? And you look at it and you've got to go, well, at the end of the day, I need to understand, one, what the outcome is of my training. So is it going to actually affect what it is that I'm actually looking to achieve? But most of the time, so we're probably going to talk more burning fat.
Yeah, I think so, because I think generically that's what the majority of people who are talking about HiiT training
Doing HiiT training,
that's
their goal.
That's their focus.
Yeah, is to burn fat. So HiiT training in simple terms is cutting down the amount of time that you're doing activity for in a interval where you do high intensity work between sort of 80 to sort of 100% of your maximum heart rate or effort, and then you have a rest period according to that at the end of the day.
Okay. So it's high intensity anaerobic. So probably the one thing that I guess that leads straight to is that it's lack of oxygen, high heart rate, the intensity, like you said, 80 to 100%. So straight away that leads into our intensity, I suppose, of what HiiT training actually is. So yeah, I'd probably give the exact same definition as what you've just said. So it's a time-saving form of training at a very high intensity interval. So if you're, I get it all the time as well, clients saying to me, all right, what's HiiT training? Is it worth me doing it? What would you say the benefits of high intensity training are?
Kind of what we touched on earlier is everyone always wants one thing to be better than the other because they want to find out what the most efficient thing is to do, because nobody wants to waste their time at the end of the day. That's what it all comes down to.
That's the biggest excuse, isn't it? Oh, I haven't got time to train.
So I will tell me what's the most efficient way of training that's going to burn the most amount of fat and that's going to give me good cardiovascular response. And go, okay, well, have you tried high intensity interval training? You tell them what it is, you put them on a program, they do it for a couple of weeks, and then they fall off the wagon because it's a little bit, they blow themselves out basically, they absolutely wreck themselves. So in effect, was that actually a good training style for them?
Yeah.
If they can't keep it up, or if they can't integrate it into their program properly, was that actually an effective workout program for them?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. Whereas if they enjoyed, say, slow steady cardio, and that was the thing that they stuck at, maybe you're not going to get as much of a response. You will obviously still get some adaptation, but you won't get as much of a cardiovascular response in terms of short intensity activities, but you will still make progress. And if you're making sure that it's consistent and that's the one that you enjoy and that's the one you stick at, then obviously that was the better option for
just
you
a
to
time
take.
factor, isn't it? Then?
Yeah.
And then it's if you've got the time to do
That's
it, then great. So it's that comparison, so we wouldn't necessarily sit here and say one is better than the other.
Oh no, never.
It's sitting here and saying maybe it's situational based on who it should fit and who it's best for. So me, for example, mine's not a time issue, it's more the way that I enjoy my training.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm not a long duration, steady state. I like to kind of know I've done my workout.
Smash yourself to bits, get it done in 20 minutes, and then focus on accessory movements afterwards. That's exactly the same.
So for me, interval training, high intensity interval training works.
Would you do it every session though?
No.
So this is the other thing. So when people say, okay, I want to do high intensity interval training, they do it like every session.
I know,
They do it
yeah.
every time they come in. So you can see how it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done it in the past when I didn't really know any better, and then wondered why after 2 weeks I was absolutely wrecked.
So we can maybe talk about why that's the case and what happens. Obviously, interval training. When I say interval training, I'm referring to HiiT. It's at that such a high level of intensity. It obviously has an impact on your body, physically, has an impact on your body. You can be sore from it if you're doing it every day. You also see the other side of things from an adrenaline point of view. So when you've when you've done high intensity interval training, if you're not used to that style of exercise, then you can find that all that adrenaline and everything that you've had pumping around your body whilst you've been doing the high intervals, that can then almost send you on a crash at the end of that training. So you might be on a bit of a high for a while and you're still sweating and dizzy, etc. But very soon after that, you may well find yourself in that fatigued state where you want to go and lay down and take a sleep. So I think it does depend on the type of training you're used to, how much you do it. Like the question you said about me doing it, I would build it into my training as a form of one of the systems I use, but I would use it alongside a series of others as well. So while we're talking about sort of building that within a program, maybe it's useful to talk about what different types of high intensity interval training. Is there any in particular that you use or have diagnosed, if you like, to people to?
I like to, when I do interval training, I'd rather do like pure interval training, so working off a ratio of 1 unit of work to 3 units of rest. So for instance, if I was going to go on a rowing machine and do intervals and I was going to row for 30 seconds, that technically means I should have about 1 minute 30 rest.
Yeah.
And I'll try and work it on sort of a pure factor, but that also means that I will not be doing 10 sets of that activity. I'll be lucky if I'm making 5.
So you like to do it pure and hit the true high intensity, 100%.
Trying to find that top output and trying to hold it there for the duration of the workout that I'm doing in that day. And that's normally when I will use high intensity interval training. And that'll be the type that I will do as well. But again, I'll only do that once a week maybe, and then the rest of my training will be.
So that kind of links, doesn't it, to one of the disadvantages of HiiT training, which is the maintenance of form. And the whole principle of it being high intensity intervals is that you have to be able to hit the high intensity. Whereas if you're doing a stupid amount of sets of that intensity, of that exercise, you're just not going to be able to hit that level of intensity for as long, which is, hence the reason it's a short period of time. But I think that's one really important thing, is that people have got to get their form and their technique right, or try and do their best as they possibly can.
I think that's difficult for beginners because you haven't really got an understanding of your capacity at that moment in time. So you think you're working hard, but in reality you're probably not, because you've never really pushed yourself that hard, and you've had no gauge, you have no knowledge of how you perform in a physical activity environment. When somebody says work as hard as you can, it's quite difficult to do so, especially, as you said, if you don't know your form and you don't know the telltale signs of your form breaking down and things. So
are we saying it's not a beginner's routine, it's not a beginner's exercise, or are we saying that you have to find ways to simplify what you're doing within that intensity as an exercise?
Again, I'll always bring it back to do the thing that you're going to be able to do on a regular basis, and the thing that you're going to enjoy doing. But if you are doing high intensity interval training every day, because that's what you enjoy, I can guarantee you're not doing it properly to be able to do it that often. Yeah. So it's then making sure that you actually understand what it is, what it's meant to be doing for you, so you have a better appreciation of going, oh, okay, I'll only assign 1 or 2 days over to that. But I think it is something that you should leave until you've built up a good base level of cardiovascular fitness first. So spend a bit of time on the treadmill, on the row machine, lower impact, steady state cardio before you start playing about with what you think is going to be the quick fix, the cut in the corners. Oh, if I put loads of effort in here, I only need to be in here for 20 minutes. But then you don't quite know your intensity, and you end up not working that hard. Yeah, underworking. You end up doing 20 minutes and you actually didn't hit.
I think this is the
hit
problem,
that
isn't it?
capacity,
Because
yeah.
you see a lot of media outlets, putting statements out there. I saw one that was, I think it was in the Telegraph or something like that, and it said that the Joe public can get all they need from their exercise regime in 4 minutes by taking on Tabata training.
Yeah.
And so they were saying that if you do Tabata training every day, that's all you need to do. But what I think the Joe public therefore reads is that exact statement, where they read the headline, whereas the actual script inside that should explain. Basically, if you don't know what an intensity is, you don't know what exercises are, and you don't know how to do them effectively.
I can do 4 minutes of work a day, and that'll get me the body that I want.
And I think it's important that 4 minutes, if that's what you're going to do, it's got to be seriously good quality work.
That is balls to the wall activity.
And so it is about education. If you're going to try and do that, you can't just get around thinking that everyone. And to be fair, the people that are going to be most appealed, that's going to appeal to most, is probably those people that maybe struggle to get that motivation to train in the first place. Hence why maybe the 4 minutes is the appeal in that sense. But in truth, if that's them, they're probably not the best person to be taking on high intensity interval training until they've got some degree of basic exercise knowledge, understanding and fitness.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So in terms of, we've kind of spoken about like adaptation and intensity and things like that, but let's actually talk about the fat burning side of things, because that's what sort of people want to use it for. So in like your opinion, is it better than steady cardio for fat burning? Because there's all this talk of...
It's calorie burning, isn't it?
It's all this talk of, if I train for 20 minutes and I do high intensity interval work, my metabolism will shoot through the roof and I'll be a fat burning machine for the rest of the day.
Personally, I think it's an age thing.
Okay.
I think if you're, for me, and for quite a few people out there, that from the understanding I have from my research, is that ideally you probably want to be between 18 and 40, there and thereabouts, to really truly benefit from high intensity interval training. Properly. On the sense of, in terms of the training that you're expected to do and the intensities that you're expected to work at, you're probably going to be better suited within that age range. Also, in terms of the human response, there's a lot of talk around human growth hormone being a response of it as well, with the extra calorie burn in the 24 hours after being due to human growth hormone increasing in that after the HiiT intervals, if you like. And to a degree, I agree with that. I think with that high intensity interval training, you're going to get that, but there are conditions around it.
There are studies that prove that to be the case.
Yeah,
but you are quite right. There are conditions.
There's conditions, absolutely. Age is a big factor. Again, intensity is a big factor. If you haven't actually nailed the right intensity, then it isn't going to give you the response that you think it's going to give you. So, I think if we're looking into fat burning itself, I think it's a good way of burning calories quickly and at a high intensity, and using it if you're in the right conditions for that 24-hour burn afterwards. I also think it's good in the sense of trying to maintain some muscle mass, whereas maybe in some steady state training, if that's all you do, that you may lose some muscle mass at the same time if we're losing weight. But again, it's all conditional. I think it's dependent on the person. And personally, if it was a beginner, to me, no, I would stick with steady state, basic resistance training, and try and get some form of higher intensity from their resistance training. Create the steady state for just a generic calorie burn, and try and find good habit and routine before I then started to try and introduce something like high intensity intervals. But I wouldn't say it's absolutely a good way of burning calories outright. If you want to get calories burned, personally, I would say it's an addition to your training program. It's not something you would do as a standard training program every single day.
Yeah, no way.
And it's something which you maybe add in once or twice a week. Or, I use them, for example, in my classes sometimes. If the class has been of a lower intensity nature to the actual class itself, then what I'll do is generally try and put a finisher in of some form of interval training towards the end, just to lift the energy levels and try and get that little bit of response from the end. But again, it's that thing of, with me, that's a little bit different. I can maintain their form by keeping an eye on them as a small group or as a one-to-one session. If I'm on my own doing a workout and I'm already tired, and then I'll try and do intervals at the end of my exercise, no matter whether I'm trying to burn fat or not.
Really?
I want to be looking after myself and making sure actually that I'm not just going to overwork myself and fatigue myself for the next day.
Is that just a preference of yours that you like doing intervals at the end of your workout? Because I'd be on the flip side.
No, generally speaking, I would do intervals at the beginning where I've got the fresh legs and everything else to do it. But it is something I would use if the nature of the session had been far more taught. So sometimes I'll teach a session where it's more technique based, and therefore they haven't maybe, although they've done a fair bit of work, it's more been practiced.
Heart rate hasn't really
heart rate's not been raised. Their muscles may not have even been truly sort of, particularly worked, and so therefore they should still have some element of intensity left in them. So that's when I would use that towards an end. But I would, if I was going to prescribe, interval training in someone's program, I would suggest it needs to be just after their warm ups, really, when they're kind of fresh but warm and ready for it.
Cool. Would you do anything else on that day as well? So if you were going to do high intensity interval work, would you then look to do other activities after you'd done it?
Maybe. Probably not after. I think it depends what you've been doing and what your goals are as well, and what your target is. If your goal is weight loss, then I encourage all my guys to be active throughout the day. So I wouldn't discourage it. However, I would say that they need to be aware of, like I said before, the adrenaline stuff, the response to that, the lower drop in energy level, perceived energy levels, the lightheadedness that can occur from it and stuff like that as well. And I think I wouldn't deem it necessary. I think if I'd done a day where I'd put interval training into that day, I'd expect the interval training to have been done at the right enough intensity and therefore not need to train further later in the day. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily an issue if someone wanted to.
Fantastic.
What about you?
Again, so I kind of went for a phase where I would just have interval training just on the day and I wouldn't do anything afterwards. But that was more for a mindset thing. So that was more, I didn't want to have to think about doing anything afterwards. I just wanted to commit fully to just doing the interval work. But this,
hitting it right.
This is when I was more focused on doing the pure sort of type of intervals rather than your, say, 1 minute on, 1 minute off kind of thing, or any sort of hybrid of interval training. Because again, I wouldn't particularly say that was like pure intervals. But yeah, it would just be more about making sure that my output was as close to the same every set that I did it, and I didn't really want to think about then having to try and squat or anything like that. Yeah. But as I got further on in my training, and obviously like mental capacity's got a little bit better as well, and just generally overall a bit fitter, I actually find in the moment after interval training I feel horrendous. And then all it takes is probably 5-10 minutes or so.
You're ready to go.
And I'm very, very warm. And that's probably the best time for me to maybe do some specific mobilisations for some big movements. And then finish off with those movements. And then that's it. Yeah, it's in the books for the day.
Okay, so we've given a lot of opinion on it and what we feel, how it works in terms of exercise prescription. If you had to nail down, right, someone said to you, right, HiiT training, what's the key benefit, what's the positives of me doing it, advantages of me doing it, and then where's the disadvantages or the more things to be considerations, should we say, rather than a disadvantage?
Okay, so the big factor is time. So being able to be in the gym for 20 minutes rather than 45 minutes. So it's quite good on that side of things. Again, I always say that it's very good for the mental side of things, being able to push yourself to that intensity is, in my opinion, a very big positive. And then, as you said, depending on what your outcome is, so if you're looking for to push your cardiovascular system that little bit harder, again, I think that's a useful tool to use as well for more the heart and the lung function.
Do you think it gives you a genuine cardiovascular response? Do you think you really adapt a good cardio system?
I hope so, after how I feel completely blown out my arse at the end. So yeah, I'd hope that would be the case, and from various sort of studies and things like that would be seen to be happening.
Do you think it's, again, one of them things which maybe in the media and the research that comes out gets misunderstood? Because let's be honest, in terms of long, if you were training for a marathon, you wouldn't do HiiT training for it. you would have to go and do some steady state training to accustom your body for it, wouldn't you? Rather than just sort of, right, HiiT training is the way forward. That's the way to increase my lung capacity.
Okay, so if we look at that, I would probably advise that person that was doing that to do a mixture. But obviously, the majority of their work would be that longer duration, slow, steady cardio. But I say it'd probably be quite beneficial. So when you come to those hills or anything like that, you do have an opportunity to sort of power up that hill, so to speak.
Okay.
But yeah, so again,
it's a combination again, isn't
combination
it?
is always a combination, yeah, always.
That's what we do though, isn't it? I suppose that's where our all-round training comes from. So other advantages, I'd say probably, like you said, time, haven't you already?
Yeah.
Where else are we at with it? Cardiovascular adaptation, we've looked into that. Anaerobic workouts in themselves. A lot of people don't ever hit an anaerobic workout. Unless you play a sport which has a degree of high intensity in it, you probably find 90% of, well, maybe not 90, but a high percent of gym users probably never hit that anaerobic system. There's not many people, when you're walking into a standard gym, training power within a gym, power sets on their weights, or, high intensity interval training on their equipment. Quite often it'll be a case of more often than not, you'll see steady state cardio, you'll see, basic resistance sets. You might see a bit of supersetting of it. So they've got some degree of heart rate there, but it's normally sat in that 60 to 80 bracket, not the, you're not likely really often see 80 to 100% intensity. So I think in terms of offering a quick solution to someone getting that level of training so they do hit their anaerobic system, and true anaerobic system, then it can provide that option. That's got to be another advantage.
Well, if I look at If I take an example from my own training, because that's all I really have to go off at the end of the day, apart from reading books, when I have done high intensity interval training, my 5k runs have been better. Mm-hmm. But the moment you start dragging me out into longer distances, that's when I start blowing up, and that's when I don't have the endurance anymore to be able to cope. Once you get past that 5k pace, that's when you really start struggling. But I found that I could push my 5k a heck of a lot harder once I'd done some more high intensity interval work.
Yeah.
But try and get me on a 10k. My 5k would probably be good in that 10k, but then the last 5k would be horrific.
Struggle, you're not conditioned. That's the other thing, isn't it? It's looking at goal setting and looking at truly what is the best way for what your goal is, not always just for calorie burn or whatever. If you've got goals outside of that, you've got to look at those as well as the response from the training that you're talking about. Disadvantages or things that need to be considered, because at the moment it all sounds great, it all sounds really positive, like everyone should do it, let's do it, but that's not something that both of us are an advocate of. So where were we saying there's considerations or disadvantages of
it's on the flip side really, isn't it? It's obviously making sure that you are mentally prepared to go in and do that workout, or otherwise it will be very half-assed, and I don't like it when I set myself up to do high intensity work and then I don't actually feel all that great, and then it's a bit of a dampener and it can kind of demotivate you a little bit.
It can taper off as well. You can even almost give up in there and done it, where I've gone into it with great ambition and then just halfway through just like, I'm not doing
blown
that.
up and just leave it.
Too much.
So it's being able to gauge it properly, not biting off more than you can chew to begin with.
Got to do this with a 100 kg barbell.
Well, or whatever. Almost to a certain extent, maybe even just do like a couple of sets and try and push yourself truly as hard as you can, just so you can get an idea of where your threshold is for that kind of stuff. Before you start laying out, I'm going to do 10 sets of this, and you get 4 sets in and you realise that, there's no way.
I think Tabata training is like that. I think a lot of people go, Tabata, it's the greatest thing. For anyone who doesn't know what Tabata is, Tabata training is basically 8 intervals of 20 seconds hard work, 10 seconds rest for 8 rounds. And generally speaking, it's done with bodyweight exercises, burpees, squat thrusts, mountain climbers, press ups, similar things.
Which is great for burning energy, but realistically, when you get to that fourth and fifth round, are you doing high intensity work anymore?
That's where the disadvantage comes in of the bad form, or it's hard to maintain good form with what you're doing. And that's why I always suggest that actually, if you're doing high intensity interval training, you're probably better off doing it either with someone who
Yeah.
can maybe help maintain that form for you by looking at it, checking it, or maybe or even in a group setting, in a class setting. But doing it on your own can be really tough.
So that's a disadvantage.
I mean, if you're going to do it on your own,
Get
maybe
yourself a partner.
Yeah, get yourself a partner. But even if you can't, maybe film yourself and then try and look for them areas where it changes, and then be more aware of those, and be mindful of the fact that, you know, your form is you're losing your form in the last 3-4 sets of what you're doing, and therefore either you do it your way, which is you cut it short at 5 sets maybe until you know that you can push the 6th, and then you push the 7th,
Yeah.
or you've got to make a conscious effort to change the to make sure that the form is there. But just be aware if that is happening and you are having to slow everything down to make sure your form is good because you physically can't handle it, you're probably no longer working in high intensity intervals.
Yeah.
Because it's quite likely you've dropped that intensity. So it is a tough energy system to work in, anaerobic, and it's a tough training system to use, which I think, like you tapped on, you've got to be probably already some sort of stage down the line in your fitness training. And then ideally you probably have someone else around when you're doing it. Cool. So we talk about people who shouldn't maybe do it. There are disadvantages for those sorts of people. If you've got any cardiovascular disease, heart disease, arterial disease, any of this kind of stuff, chronic disease effectively.
Probably not the best thing to be doing.
Unlikely that it's going to be the solution for you.
Stressing yourself out a bit too much there,
Again, if you've got joint issues,
and
it depends on the exercises you're doing, but typically interval training is done with minimal equipment, can pretty much be done anywhere, and is done largely with body weight, and therefore if you have got any joint issues, that can become a problem if you're doing certain exercises, so you'll have to prescribe your exercises carefully for what you're doing. And don't expect it to be the be all and end all. You've got to be able to actually hit the high intensity intervals. If you're one of these people who maybe thinks you can but can't, find a trainer, find someone to help you find that level and see where you're truly at. But if you're brand new to exercise, don't get pent up by it. Try and get yourself into habit of training regularly first, and then maybe look at it as a solution around that. What would you say if someone came to you just interestingly and said, right, I'm getting myself fit, I'm getting into exercise, I ain't got any time no Dave, so I'm doing interval training, and I don't care what you say about not doing it every day, I'm doing it every day. What would you say, other than you shouldn't?
Can I study you and let me know how it goes?
What would you say that they could maybe do to try and, because let's be honest, not everyone's going to take that advice, and they can't just create time or whatever. So if they've got all the right ambitions, they want to train as hard as they can because they've got 20 minutes to get it done every day, what can they do to simplify and make it as easy as possible, or make it possible for them, even if it's in the short term? So one thing maybe I would say is they've got to look at their exercises, haven't they, and obviously make sure that they're hitting different parts of their body, because
so it's
one day after the other, you know, you can't be nailing the same body parts and expecting to be not getting sore, not aching, and not fatiguing from that in the future. So I guess that's one way of trying to do it. You've got to get everything else right, I suppose, as well. Diet, nutrition, that's the massive factor. Everyone talks about HiiT training.
Quite a lot of people glaze over that as well, isn't it? It's a case of...
I'm doing HiiT training now.
I'm doing HiiT training now, so my diet doesn't really have to be in check. And when also you talk to other professionals, so fitness professionals, and they always say, oh yeah, HiiT training is really, really good for you as long as your diet's in check. It's like, well, what actually does your diet in check mean?
Diet in check, yeah.
But that's a whole other podcast. We'll get into that probably at another time. A bit more on the nutritional side of it as well. But you're quite right in regards to, you might want to simplify your movements, but make sure you're still getting a full body workout. That's why if I'm pushed for time, I'll get myself on the rowing machine, try and get as many muscles worked in one go, really put sort of the pedal to the metal, and then done for the 20 minutes, and that should see me through for a couple of days or so if I needed it to.
Cool, excellent. All right, there's our views on HiiT training. Simple.